Daybreak, we're just in time for that conversation we're having of the main issues that affected the business community in 2019. One of them was the cargo containers being held at the airport, at the port actually, and still being held. That's the interesting thing. And then there was also the issue of pending bills. Now the government has resorted to almost threats to the counties to pay up.
Yes, telling them that they have funds, they need to do so.
And the cost of living, according to Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, Kenyans are paying higher today. So let's start with the issue of the cargo at the port. So in May 27th, I think, that's when the president gave the directive. There are 1,200 containers that were being held at the time. 7 months later, only 542 of them have been released. The one person who's very much involved in that is Samuel Karanja, the CEO, Importers and Small Traders Association of Kenya, is with us this morning. Asante sana for making time.
Thank you.
Bidhem Wema, investment analyst, also with us here in the morning. Asante sana. Wangari Muikia, Economist and Expertise Global Consulting. Thank you so much for making time for us this morning. And Sam, I'll start with you. What's taking so long?
Well, Trevor, one of the things that we have noted with the government, there are so many government agencies in the port, and I think the president made an effort to make sure that we have fewer government agencies because sometimes they are duplicating what's supposed to be done by one agency. The other thing is the policy level, because you find that, and that's the question that we have been asking when those government agencies, how do they raise their money? Because you find like KEBS is going to charge you, AC is going to charge you, then you find that KRA is going to charge you. So you find that most of the people, most of the traders who are our members cannot be able to follow those bureaucratic policies which are there. So it has been a painful process which has been there. Right now we have already released 542. We told the president we have 1,000 containers, but some containers were pushed out of the list because some of them were cooking oil, which brought a lot of politics, you remember? Yeah. And so they were pushed out of the list of the amnesty, and some of them have to ship back. And my members are importers and Small Trade Association of Kenya, so we lacked the rationale why the cooking oil was supposed to be shipped back, and yet it had passed all the tests with the Ministry of Health. Yeah. So I think one of the biggest pains is that the policies which are in KEBS, Kenya Bureau of Standards, those policies are sabotaging the economy. You are the office of the president yesterday, and you always have weekly briefs on this particular concern. Even after presidential directive, containers are still being held at the port. First of all, is there any that have perishable goods? Because it's been 7 months now, so we're looking at losses here. Yes, because you find that there are some importers who import milk, powdered milk, which has expired already, and it's huge because one of the policies which was made by the government was you're supposed to have a license by the dairy board, and that was brought after they have already loaded their cargo. So when they came to the port, they had to get that document, which is a painful process again. So you find that because that process, I think the government wants to not us to import some things, but I think they are hiding some policies from us. So it's an ambush. Sometimes you find that when you're getting to the port is when you're getting to know that some policies are in effect and they were not publicized enough. And that is the reason why we have a fight with the government. Number one, how do you disseminate information from the boardroom to the grassroots? Because you have to know your people. I lead a people who are not very, a good number of us traders, we are not very literate with the government policies and how the government works. And that is why, as an association, we decided to partner with the government. What we do usually have weekly updates of what is happening. And I think we have laid down our views on how the government policies are supposed to be done. And I give an example. Right now, it has already been gazetted that we have now a local COC. Yeah. That local COC, initially there was a local COC and the president gave us an amnesty. This is the second amnesty that we are working on. And you see, when you're given a second amnesty, it means there are policies which are not working. Because ideally we cannot be living under presidential handouts. So a meeting once a week, has that improved the access of information to those Kenyans at the grassroots level which you just discussed? You see, once you have a meeting once a week, we are actually updating the office of the president what we are doing. But you see sometimes you don't have these government agencies represented in the meetings. And I give an example. Where I was going, you have 20%, we have given 20% customs value, that's what you're going to be charged for the local COC. 20%, it means if, for example, I consolidate cargo worth 10 million shillings, I have to pay 2 million shillings to KEBS. And KEBS, I can tell that without fear of contradiction, with the exposure that we have with that government agency, has no capacity to give standardization to the Kenyan
So what
cargo.
will you be doing to make sure that still at the end of the day, Kenyans, the SMEs, the people who are running this small business are able to access and know this sort of information, the policies that you're talking about, they're on paper, but Kenyans don't know about it. So what will you do as the CEO of the Importers of Small Traders Association to make sure that, yes, whatever is happening here at the top with the president in terms of information and access to knowledge is trickling down to people at the bottom?
That's what we are doing. We are disseminating that information. But one of the things is that you find that these government agencies are also selling that information, ideally. They are selling that information. Number one, we have a book that talks about standardization that is sold at 2,000 shillings.
Right.
So let me ask, a small importer, we are talking about consolidators. This is a person who is going to import goods worth 50,000. We are not talking about a full load container. So this person, ideally, when you tell them you're going to sell that book, which are not even available, you see, the government must be able to make sure that this information is free. They disseminate that information to the grassroots. And we are doing that. We are there as a bridge to the traders. And we have been doing that as much as we can. And we are telling them, why can't you leverage on us? Because we are the traders. Put us in those positions whereby we can be able to influence policy. Because once you make policies on the board level, whereby some of those people who are making policies don't even know what it means to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
Because they have an 8 to 5 job.
Yes. Wangari, as an economist, you hear this. You hear this, and my question is then, what sort of methods would you advise SMEs to sort of adapt to close the gap? 7 months in waiting. Those are losses that have been made. Those are containers that also have perishable goods that we've mentioned. What sort of methods would you advise SMEs to sort of adapt?
I think just even to respond to what Brana Karanja has said, some of these things have been happening for a long time. There are a lot of inefficiencies in terms of thinking of how processes should happen within how government processes information and how it provides support to the economy. Right. So in terms of even thinking about the SGR and thinking about the containers being held, thinking about strategy and planning has not been at the forefront of government policy. Transparency of information, providing information to organizations, to small traders, to importers has not been as efficient. And this is a systemic issue that has been happening for a very long time. And even in my work supporting the government with financial reporting, budgeting, planning, and revenue, this appears to be something that has continued and is not has continued unfettered and is not being resolved. So it's up to the public, it's up to associations to understand the policies and to break it down for the citizen. Because if they don't do that, it is unlikely that the government is going to turn around and start providing this information in a transparent and efficient manner. Right. So I would say, even in our work at Expertise Global Consulting, what we do is we try to understand the policies. We're trying to partner with the Chamber of Commerce, we're trying to partner with the Association of Manufacturers to break down, to understand what policies and laws are being passed and break them down for the traders and for business in Kenya. Because we understand that every day new laws are being passed, new policies are being made. Many people are not sitting at the table. And unless we disseminate this information for the public, this information will not be available and it will continue to affect business going forward.
And Bide, what do you think is the impact of this sort of standoff in the economic sense to speak? Because there was also the issue of SGR cargo being transported via SGR and not via the trucks on the road. Now the CEO is saying COCs, which is a certificate of conformity, is a bit of an issue now. And the traders, their containers are still being held 7 months later. Some of them are still at the port. What kind of impact does that have then on the economy? Because these are small traders.
Firstly, thank you for having me on the show. I think we are getting to an era globally and also nationally where there's a lot of government intervention on a regulatory basis. So regulatory risk is becoming a thing that you have to contend with. So it has to stop being a matter of why is the government doing this to how can I quickly adapt to what the government has decided to do and move forward. Now, a couple of things I think have happened when you're looking at the investment scenario in Kenya. For the SMEs, we are largely traders. Our imports are certainly much higher than our exports. So that has to be a conduit that allows, the government has to be able to allow us to be able to trade if they're going to enhance their own taxes, because we are running on a fiscal budget, on a fiscal deficit. Yeah. So for them to be able to enhance their revenue collection, then there has to be an integration of, I want to do business, but you must be able to allow me to do business. But then again, the way policy works in Kenya is you need to have a very strong association, not an association that is focused solely on disseminating information to the grassroots, but one that has a lot of clout in terms of talking to the political elite, whether it's lobbying with the MPs, whether it's getting into the government offices. KEPSA has been very successful in doing this. And maybe that's a model that we could all try and emulate in our different setups. Because if you keep saying that you're going to fight and say it's wrong for the government to compel us to to bring our goods through the SGR, you're losing that battle. It's better to have a conversation that says, okay, fine, so you're going to make us bring this cargo through this way. Then can we actually review the matrices of success, which I think is what is being done through the association.
And so far from our conversation this morning, what I'm picking out is that access of information seems to be one of the big issues. So then be there on top of that. How do we change these policies, or how do we move from these policies just being on paper, as Samuel is saying, to it being actual things that are translating on the ground and positively affecting Kenyans and their businesses? Because right now it's just policy, it's just on paper.
I don't know how to answer that. I really don't know how to answer that.
Let me hear from Samuel, because Samuel, you were with the president, these policies are on paper, you studied with him. How do we move this from just information that is on paper to things that Kenyans know about and actualizing?
We have engaged the government on actually the formation of the policies. Number one, the formation of the some of these policies are very punitive, and I said in my last statement, sometimes you give responsibility to people who don't understand what a small medium entrepreneur goes through. And that is why those people, when they're making those policies, they're making policies from a platform of ignorance. Because when you're talking about SME, you're talking about a person who's bringing hawkers things, assorted things, which the mamamboga or the hawker on the street or the street vendor, the person who sells some car spare parts on the streets or on the highways, they are buying from them. So you have to have the mindset, when you're making those policies, you have to have the mindset of those small traders. Now, these government policies which are there, some of them actually, as I say, they're very punitive. Number two, they're not, the rationale behind that is the government to make more money at the expense of the traders. So you find that there's no synergy between government agencies. You find like KEBS is trying to get as much money as possible from the trader. KRA is trying to get as much money as possible from the trader. Then you find that AC is also doing the same. Let me give us a case scenario. We have traders, and I have even a case scenario which I presented even to the MD of KEBS, whereby when I bring goods and the person on the ground who is the KEBS representative, if I don't bribe them, they're not going to pass my goods as the standardized goods. Now, when I bring my goods, I have a PVOC. That means I have a certificate of conformity from the country of origin. That means that my goods have been given a clean bill of health from the source. And this is a government agency that is actually, this is an agency that is actually working on behalf of a government agency. So that COC is as good as I'm given by the KEBS. So when I'm coming to the port of entry, to the port Mombasa, then I'm subjected to what we call 100% verification. Once I'm subjected to that, then it doesn't pass. Look at that, it doesn't pass. So you give
it passed at the point of origin, but it's
you give SGS, Cotecna, and the rest of those companies mandate to check your goods which are coming to your country, but you don't have faith with that document that they gave to the trader. So how did they pass the standardization that you gave to that agency? And they have come to fail in Mombasa. It beats the sense why even you're supposed to have those people. Now, the president, I remember when we had a meeting when we were, I think it was Safari Park, the taxpayers did. The president said, why can't we have a local COC? You see, sometimes we mislead the head of state. The local COC is not the issue. The issue is the government agencies like KEBS. Because number one, once I'm bringing goods from China or from Dubai or wherever I'm bringing the goods from, when I get a COC, it gives me the audacity to import.
Right.
It gives me, and I can be able even to borrow money from the bank, because I have been given the COC that when it comes to Nairobi, the goods do not pass the standards. So you find those kind of policies which are made, ideally they are there to finish or to even sabotage the economy, but we are going around. We have to hit the nail on the head. These government agencies must have capacity, because what we are looking for is an environment whereby we can be able to do business, as my sister is saying.
And if I may add, I think we shouldn't, policy making is a very detailed process. The minute you hear a policy has been initiated and passed very quickly, be very suspicious of it, because policy making involves many stakeholders, and engaging them and getting their views can take a very long time. But that being said, the SGR has been being planned and being implemented over a long period of time. So then it goes back to planning and strategy. When did you start having these discussions? You needed to start having these discussions at the beginning of even thinking about SGR and bringing these people to the table. And that gives us many years to engage stakeholders, bring their ideas to the table, and then implement. This is why we're having the problems we have now, because the process are being fast-tracked with nobody at the table.
All right, we have to take a quick break here on Daybreak. When we come back, let's talk about the pending bills now. The government is resorting to threats to the counties to just pay the people you owe the money. The counties, on the other hand, argue that there are some of those bills that are suspect and they're from the previous government. Therefore, they don't want to pay. As the top fight, the grassroots are the ones who get hurt. That in just a bit. See you in just a short while.